Hey guys, Steve from Flite Brothers, and today I'm doing a complete build of a Diatone Tyrant 180 version 1.1 quadcopter frame. In preparation of this build, I've went ahead and took the heat shrink off of all of my little B20 amp ESCs, and I went ahead and removed the motor wires and retinned those pads so they're ready to accept the motor wires. I went ahead and cut my motor wires to length and tinned the ends of those so they're ready to connect to the ESCs. I also got my Flysky micro receiver from Banggood shrink wrapped and the wires all ready so it will plug directly into my Diatone Thin Naze Rev 6B flight controller and ready to go as soon as that gets mounted on there as well. So I've made all these preparations so that I can quickly get this build together, and I'm going to get started right now. And the first thing I'm actually going to do is I want to get this flight controller, this PDB all tinned. Right now it's just like it came from the factory, and none of the pads are tinned yet, so nothing is ready to use for getting the wire soldered on yet. So I'm going to get those all tinned and ready. The other thing I also did is I got my battery lead soldered and tinned. I got some 10 gauge wire, and it's all tinned up and hooked up to my XT60, so that'll be ready to go too. So I'm going to get this PDB all tinned up and ready to go, and then I'm going to get some of the mounting hardware on for the standoffs and stuff like that, which will actually hold this PDB in, because at the moment it's just loosely fit in the frame. And so after I tin it, I'm going to get it mounted so it can't go anywhere, and then we'll work on getting the motors and ESCs in place. The tinning that I'm going to do, I want to make sure for the camera, I'm going to be able to use this plug because I'm using the all-new Diatone 800 TVL FPV camera that they just started stocking at Diatone USA. I'm going to be using that camera, and that requires a 5-volt out, so I'm going to use this plug right here for the camera, so I'm all set with that. For the VTX, the output on the VTX is VCC, and I don't want to use the VCC. I'd rather use a 12-volt PDB to go to my VTX, so instead of using this plug to get power to the VTX, I'm going to use these 12-volt and ground pads right here. So I'm going to tin all the ESC spots on all 4 corners. I'm going to tin the battery lead spots, and I'm going to tin these 2 pads for the 12-volt and ground for my VTX. The audio, the video and ground I will still get from the plug here, but I'm going to get my 12-volt source right here from the PDB. So I'm going to move over to my soldering station, and we're going to get that part started. Alright, so here I am at the soldering station. I've got my iron heated up, and I'm using currently just the standard size tip, not the small one, not the big chisel tip, just the standard size is fine. I've got my Kessler 6040 solder here, the 0.31 diameter rosin core solder, which is an excellent solder to be using. And I'm just going to go right through and tin all of the pads that I talked about around this ESC so it's ready to go when I'm ready to solder the ESCs on and solder the other battery leads and the other things that I need. So here we go. Alright, I've got all my pads tinned and ready to go for the PDB, so that's set and ready for hooking up the ESCs to it and getting it mounted into the carbon fiber bottom plate. But before I head back, I might as well take this time while the iron's hot to get all the motors and ESCs soldered together, so we're going to go into that next. Back on the workbench, I've got my ESCs all soldered to the motor wires, ready to go. I'll just have to trim and tin the power leads and the signal wires to get them ready for the PDB. And I also tinned the PDB, so that's all set and ready to go into this carbon fiber bottom plate. So what I'm going to start with is the flight controller mount. That'll just get this held in place nice and firmly. So included with the kit are 5, and I love this about this kit. One thing that's really nice is when they always include extras. So there's almost one of extra everything. There's one extra of the large aluminum standoffs. There's one extra of the small aluminum standoffs. There's one extra of the aluminum standoffs that go in between the high camera plate and the middle plate. So they gave you a lot of extra stuff, which is awesome. I love when a company gives you extra little things. I mean, they're only about probably less than a penny each, so just throw a few extras in. It's so much nicer that way. So what we have here is the nylon standoffs. I'm going to start with those, and then I'm going to mount them with a screw from underneath. Just got to decide which of the different screws that they gave me I need to use for that one. I think these are going to be motor screws because the length. These will be the other screws for the standoffs. So I'm going to go ahead and use these ones here. Alright, now that I got those standoffs in place, this PDB is locked in there. It's not going to be able to go anywhere. So before I put the other standoffs in, I want to go ahead and get the ESCs mounted and soldered with the motors, because if I put these other standoffs in these holes, they're just going to kind of get in the way, and I'm not going to be able to get my hands in here the way I'd like to. So what I need to do is decide on the length of wire I'm going to need from my ESCs to those spots on the PDB, which isn't going to be very much. So I'm going to have to go ahead and measure those, get them cut, and then we'll go back to the soldering iron to get those taken care of. Okay, I'm back over at the soldering station, and the next thing I want to do is just get all of these motor wires tinned, and then I'm going to, after I tin them, I'm actually going to solder them onto the PDB and then mount the motors. I was going to mount the motors first, but as it turns out, I just think it'll be easier to get the wires in there first and then go ahead and attach the motors. So here we go. I'm going to use these large pieces of shrink wrap to hold the ESCs on the arms. The arms do have these slots so you can put a strap through and around the ESC, but I'd rather not. I'm going to just go ahead and use some shrink wrap. It's my preferred method, that or the silicone tape that sticks to itself, but as long as I have the shrink wrap and I'm in the beginning of my build, I'm going to go ahead and use this. So I'm going to slide that over that, slide it over the arm, and solder these wires up where they need to be, and then once I get the motors mounted, I'll shrink that shrink wrap right up. Alright, gonna move over to go mount the motors. Okay, so I've gotten all of the motors soldered up. So now I'm just gonna get them mounted. So I'm gonna get these screws out for the motor mounts and get to that. Okay, I got all 4 motors mounted, and I'm going to go ahead and get the shrink wrap shrunk up so that the ESCs will stay in place. Alright, so I'm back from getting the ESCs mounted. I had a little trouble with the camera that cut out on me, so we missed a little bit of that, but no big deal. I got the ESCs all shrink wrapped onto the arms, so they're nice and secure, hooked up to the motors, good to go. The only thing that happened, and this is just a little thing to be aware of, is when before you solder the ESCs to the motor, line them up on the PDB first to make sure that they're going to be the right orientation for the positive and negative, because as you might be able to see, when I soldered mine to the motors and then I laid them down, it turned out I had the positive on the wrong side and the negative on the wrong side, so I had to crisscross them to solder them to the PDB. It's no big deal, it's not going to make a difference in performance, but it just doesn't look quite as neat as it might have if I had done it a little better than that. So just something to be aware of. I'm not going to change it now, but eventually I'm going to put some more powerful motors on here, and when I do that I'm going to switch them out so they're laying flat like they should. But anyway, no big deal. We're going to move on and get the flight controller mounted and a couple of things wired up to it. That should be the next step. So this is the Naze 32 thin Diatone thin Naze 32 based off of a Rev 6B, and this PDB is lined up just perfectly for all of the things that we need for this. If it gets mounted on those standoffs like so, then you can see that the ESCs line up with the 2 plugs there. The buzzer plug lines up on this side and the VBAT plug lines up on this side, so all those things are there ready for us. The only other thing I want to have ready to go before I mount that is my receiver. Now I'm using a Flysky micro receiver from Banggood. I got it shrink wrapped, got it soldered up, it's ready to go, it's ready to hook up, and I actually want to mount this underneath the flight controller. It's so small and tiny that it can fit there with no problem. The only thing is I need a way to keep it in place. So I've been debating a few different options. I really don't want to hot glue it to the board there, so I think what I'm gonna do is I think I'm just gonna put a Velcro strap right around the whole body to hold that in place, and that'll be enough. So I'm gonna grab one of those and get it wrapped right around there to hold that receiver in place. Now these are the little Velcro straps that come in a roll from Lowe's or Home Depot, and I don't know why more people aren't suggesting these things. I've broken lots of battery straps, lots of other different Velcro straps out there, and these things hold up so well, it's amazing. The Velcro holds up well, and they're cheap, so really consider getting a hold of these and using them. They're excellent Velcro straps. So what I'm going to do is just run this underneath like so, and thread it through. I don't want to cover up that switch on the side there, so I'm trying not to do that. Hold it nice and tight around that receiver. Now if you're wondering about covering up those BCs, those are our switching BCs, and switching BCs are very efficient. They do their job very well, and they don't wind up transferring much of what they do into, or converting much of what they do into heat. So there's no real reason to be concerned that by covering those up I'm going to, overheat those or anything like that. And plus there's still plenty of airflow underneath the receiver and underneath this strap, so it should be no problem. I'm going to strap that around All right, now here's my receiver in place. I'll work on mounting the wire later, but that is there and that is not going anywhere, and this wire is set to go right up and plug into there. So the other thing I need is a couple of wires. So I'm going into this bag here that came with the Tyrant. I'm going to pull some of these wires that I need out of here. For now, what I'm going to need is this one here. This is the ESC one. In fact, I'll get it plugged right in. And just make sure the black wire, which is your ground one, lines up with the black on the side. Let's see. There we go. Should just slide right in there. And you want to always be a little gentle with these Pico blade connectors, because it is possible to bend if you're not getting it straight in, to bend the pins inside. So they're honestly not the greatest thing, but for ease of switching out flight controllers, if you needed to, makes it really easy. So this is going to go up into the side. This is going to go up into this side for the receiver, and then we've got VBAT. I'm going to get that plugged in here. There we go. VBAT, and I just realized that I covered up the buzzer plug with my Velcro strap. So I think if I just get that buzzer plug in there before I tighten up the strap, we'll be fine. I've got all the wires for my flight controller plugged in, so I'm just going to go ahead and plug them all into the flight controller now. Here's my buzzer. That's in place. I'm going to try and tuck them underneath. I don't want them hanging out where they could get caught on something or sucked in anywhere. I'm going to try and tuck them underneath when I set it down, just like that. Same thing with my ESC wire. Should get plugged in here. Now, if you were using a different flight controller on this build that didn't have all these plugs, Diatone has made it easy and provided you with everything you need to do that. Alright, there we go. Provided you with everything you need to do that by giving you these extra wires. So there's extra wires that would go, this one could go in here for the ESCs, and then you just solder this to the pins on your ESC pads on your flight controller, and gives you some extra ones for VBAT and buzzer. So you've got the options here. They give you all the wires you need to do it. Like I've said before, I really wish they were all silicone wires, but it is what it is. We're going to move on and go ahead and mount the flight controller now. Everything's plugged in that I need for the flight controller. And these are the nylon screws, so they're not going to short anything. Nylon screws into the nylon spacers. That's how it should be. And you can see just how incredibly neat this build is. You know, already very few wires hanging out anywhere, very few wires dangling around. Everything is tucked in really nice, and with that micro receiver tucked under there, I mean, there's just nothing to it. It's fantastic. Very clean build. All right. I think the next thing we'll do is go ahead and get the camera mount put on. Camera mount comes with the necessary hardware to mount it, and the mount itself, of course. So that's going to go right up here in the front on the thing marked camera mount. We're going to go ahead with that. Okay, so camera mount's mounted. Didn't put the camera in yet, but I'll get to that a little later. So that'll slide in there no problem, and then we just tighten her down. And after that, the next thing I'm going to want to do is get all of these standoffs put on. And I'm also going to shortly move over to the soldering station again, because in order to use the included plugs for the camera and for the VTX, which we have here and here, in order to use those, I'm going to have to splice the camera wires. This of course plugs into the back of the camera, but doesn't go anywhere from there. So I'm going to have to cut these and splice them into this plug so that we can use this plug. And same thing with the VTX. When I get the VTX out, I'm going to have to splice these wires so that I can plug it directly into there. Okay, so here we are back on the bench, and as you just saw over at the soldering station, I got my battery lead attached here, which is excellent. And I also attached the wire I need for my VTX. And you might remember early on I told you I wanted to use 12 volts. So I actually have the power wire going onto that 12 volt pad there instead of into the battery voltage that was in that plug. And I have the video and ground spliced into the video and ground on this original harness for the VTX. So that's all set. I also did the same thing for the camera. I'm using the 5 volt from this plug, so I spliced all 3 wires from that plug. I didn't use the audio one, so that's just cut off. Spliced those into the original harness for the camera. So the camera is ready to be hooked up here, and the VTX plug is ready here, but I'm not going to plug it in until I have the plate on with the VTX mounted on it. So we'll start with the camera. What I'm going to do is just slide this camera into the mount. It fits perfectly into that ring, and this notch here lines up with that little spot on the lens holder. So I'm going to just slide the camera in. And these particular mounts are really nice and tight, so I don't actually have to put a screw in. You could put a little self-tapping screw right there if you wanted to hold that, but these mounts are really nice and snug, and once I tighten this screw up really good, it's gonna snug that camera in real tight. Alright, now I'm not quite sure what angle I'm gonna go with when I fly this, so I'm just gonna put it somewhere close and tighten it up. I usually fly around 40 degrees if I'm doing racing, and around 30 for acro. Alright, so that's about ready. I'm just going to get this plugged in, and we should have our camera set to go. There we go. So just going to tuck those wires underneath, bend that camera back into the angle I want right there, and the camera is mounted and good to go. Looking nice. Alright, so for the VTX, I'm actually going to mount the VTX onto the bottom plate. Now the one that comes with the Ready to Fly has a VTX that mounts right into this hole with a 90-degree adapter. I don't have that. I just have my go-to VTX is the Eachines ET200R. It's a 40-channel race band, 200 milliwatt, and they've worked great for me. Some people have said they haven't had very good luck. I really have enjoyed this this transmitter. It's worked very well in all my builds, so I just keep using it. So what I want to do is I actually want to mount this in here underneath the bottom plate, just like this, and it'll be right in here. And what I want to do, what I love to do, is put a small cable tie that goes right around the connector here. If I put a cable tie around that connector and then around something on that top plate, it's going to basically act as a stress relief. So if anything pulls on this antenna, this is a homemade antenna, some foam and a ping pong ball, by the way, in case you were wondering. I know it looks kind of funny. But anyway, if I get a cable tie right around the connector there and something pulls on that antenna, it actually takes a lot of the stress off of these solder joints and keeps it from breaking. So I'm going to start by doing that. I'm going to feed this cable tie right up through here, and I'm going to just tighten that up right there. And that's going to be what really holds the VTX for the most part. So let's get that tightened up. Now my battery is not going to sit anywhere near the back here, so I'm not worried about the cable tie sticking up or anything like that. I'll cut the excess off, but okay. So that's good and tight there. So then I think where I'll put the other cable tie is right through this hole and around there, and that'll help hold it in place. First I'm going to just cut this one off. Okay. Alright, now I'm going to put a bigger cable tie, because the smaller ones tend to put a little too much stress on some of the components. Even the big ones, you don't want to pull them too tight. And when you do them this way also, one thing, actually I think I'll kind of go at an angle across it like this. When you do a cable tie on a VTX or anything where there's little components like that, you want to be careful. You don't want to pull it too tight, because those different little components on there, it's true if you use cable ties with ESCs, which I really don't recommend. There's a lot more stress on the arms, and cable ties on ESCs generally don't mix well. But you just don't. I'm going to get it snug, but I'm not going to tighten it up too much. I got a lot of tension. Just because I don't want to put too much stress on the components on here. So that's, you know, that's good and snug. That's not going anywhere. Give it one more click. There we go. All right. And there's my VTX is mounted. It's ready to go. Once I get that top plate on here, then I'll just be able to pop this plug in from the side, and that'll be ready to go as well. So that's going to sit right about there, and this plug will pop in before we set that plate into place. So that is nice and snug. I feel like I might be able to get one more click, but no, not going to do it. Don't want to stress it. So just going to cut that off. Okay, so now on my top plate, the VTX is mounted and ready to go. Now the other thing to mount is my regular antenna. So the regular antenna for my receiver, which remember is mounted under the flight controller there, I'm going to have that come up. Let's see, where do I want that to come up? I think I'll have it come up right there. That should be out of the way for my battery. I'm planning on using these 1300 4 cells sitting on top. So if that's what I use, should be plenty of room for that antenna to come up there and not bother anything. So I think I'm going to have the antenna come right up there. So what I'm going to do to mount that antenna, it's actually kind of a cool little trick, is I'm going to take a wide cable tie. Okay, I'm going to take a second cable tie, and I'm just going to cut the head off of that cable tie. Alright, now the only reason I need to cut that head off is because there's a lot of blank space there. You'll see why I need to do this in a second. I'm going to feed this head, the first cable tie, that head right through there, so it sits at the end just like that. Okay? Alright, now that's just filling space. That's the only purpose for that. It's just to take up space. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this cable tie right up through the hole where I want the antenna to go up. Okay? See how that works? And the head of the cable tie won't let it come up any farther. Now to tighten it there in place, once I get the antenna fed up with that, feed the antenna up through the same hole in the cable tie. Okay. Now, once I get this completely into place where it belongs, I made this antenna way too long, but that's alright. It'll be funny. Then I'm going to take another cable tie head and come down, and that'll pinch the cable tie right in place and hold it there. And this cable tie will kind of act as a stiffener for the antenna, and we'll just put a piece of shrink wrap over that. So I'm going to take that out for now, and I'll show you that. But before I can do that, I am set to get all of my spacers on. So I'm going to grab my 4 short spacers and my screws for the spacers, and we're going to get these spacers going here. Again, and 1 extra of each spacer in this kit, which I'm so like when they send you extra stuff, just to make sure you got enough. You got extras if you need them. It's fantastic. Diatone did something right there, which is awesome. Alright, so I'm going to get all these spacers hooked up right now. So I'm going to go back fast forward while I do that. I have my spacers in place, and we're going to go ahead and get the top plate mounted. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my my VTX plugged in. So make sure that's lined up the right way. All right. We're plugged in, ready to go. So I'm just going to make sure this wire folds down in an appropriate fashion. I used a little more wire than I should have, admittedly. Okay. Good. Alright, so next thing I'm going to put this, I'm going to feed this cable tie and my antenna up through the hole that I wanted it to go through. Okay. Now I don't want to put any stress on the the solder joint where the antenna is soldered to the receiver, so I'm going to make sure there's a little slack there. But I'm going to mount this plate before I go any farther. So these are the standoffs that have the screw coming out of them. You can see them there. Those are what goes in and holds the front of the bottom plate or top plate on. And then I'm going to use 2 more of these screws in the back. So I definitely made this antenna way too long, but we're just gonna go with it because why not? It looks funny, but all right. There we go. I don't know if you can see in there, but I'm trying to make sure the antenna isn't pulled way up like that because that's gonna put stress on the receiver. So I'm gonna just make sure the antenna is flat down against the PDB there, where it's not going to have any additional stress. So then I'm going to take another cable tie, and I'm going to cut the head off of this one too. And I'm going to get this antenna in place where I want it, and then I'm going to slide this head onto that cable tie as well. When this gets down to the bottom, it's just going to pinch that whole thing to the frame like so. So now I've got this nice flexible cable tie and this antenna wire, and what we're going to do is slide a piece of heat shrink tube over the whole thing. It should be about the right size, I think. Okay. Oh, maybe not. Yes. Yes. No, maybe. Yeah, we're good. We'll get it. There we go. Right down to the bottom, and I'm actually I'm gonna need 2 pieces. It's ridiculously long. I should have paid a little more attention when I made it. That's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off here because there's no sense in covering that up. This antenna's outrageous, but alright, we're gonna go with it. What the heck? That'll be funny. I'm gonna hit it with the heat gun. Just shrink wrap that wire, the antenna wire, right against that cable tie. Okay, and once you have the cable tie and the wire and the shrink wrap all on there, you got this nice flexible antenna that's always going back into position where it needs to, and it's also going to resist breaking, anything like that. It's very, very well done. So it works out really, really well. So there's my antenna. My VTX is hooked up. Camera's ready. So the last piece here before we do anything else is to get the top plate on, the camera plate. So that completes the actual build. Now I'm going to take it up to the computer, hook it in. I'm going to flash all of the ESCs with a newer version of BL Heli. I'm going to make sure that all the ESCs are spinning the motors the correct directions, and I'm going to flash a newer version of Betaflight and program the flight controller. And when that is done, this thing will be ready to fly. So that completes the build portion, and I'm gonna go get this thing ready to go, get some props on it, and I should be getting some flight videos out very soon. So thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, want to see more builds, want to see more testing, more flight videos, please like, share, subscribe, and as always, we'll catch you next time.